The wind outside the cabin moaned against the wooden walls like a lonesome ghost. Dust swirled across the plains, painting the sky a copper gold that melted into dusk. Inside, the small cabin glowed with the amber light of a lantern. The smell of pinewood smoke and rain drifted through the cracks. It was quiet, too quiet except for the faint sound of her trembling breath. Clara sat on the edge of the rough-hewn bed, fingers tangled in the lace of her wedding veil. Her heart beat hard enough to shake her ribs. The man standing before her, the man she had married that morning, seemed carved from the same earth that surrounded them. Broad-shouldered, sun-browned, eyes the color of storm clouds over the prairie. Daniel McRae, the rancher everyone in town spoke about in half-whispers and sideways glances. He didn't speak for a long time. He simply watched her, as if trying to read the story in her eyes. And she couldn't help but look back, though her pulse was fluttering like a trapped bird. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and edged with the kind of strength that came from years of solitude. "You're afraid," he said quietly. Clara swallowed, her throat dry. "I don't know how to be a wife," she whispered. The words fell out of her like confession, bare and trembling. "I never thought I'd marry like this. Not out here, not so soon." Daniel took a slow step toward her. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But life out here doesn't wait for perfect plans." She lifted her eyes, uncertain. "You deserve someone who knows what she's doing." "Someone strong, not—" He interrupted her softly. "You're here, Clara, that's enough for now." For a moment they just breathed the same air. The quiet thick between them. Outside, a branch scraped the window pane. Somewhere a horse snorted in the corral. Daniel crouched slightly, his voice dropping. "You think being a wife means knowing how to bake bread or mend shirts or smile on command?" He shook his head. "It's about standing beside someone even when the storms come. We'll figure out the rest." Her hands trembled as she touched the edge of the bedpost. "And what do you want from me, Daniel?" He paused, then said simply, "The truth." She blinked. "The truth?" "Yes, when you're scared, say so. When you're angry, tell me. When you laugh, let it be real. Don't hide behind what you think a wife should be." His gaze softened. "I've lived alone too long to want a ghost beside me." Something inside her loosened, a knot she hadn't known she was holding. The silence stretched again, but it was gentler this time, like a blanket settling around them. She smiled faintly, her lips trembling. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said with a half-smile. "But nothing worth holding ever is." The lantern flickered, casting gold over his face. She saw the lines of fatigue there, the roughness of his hands, the quiet yearning that matched her own. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand. It was warm, solid grounding. "Maybe I can learn," she murmured. Daniel nodded. "You already are." For a while they said nothing. The air filled with the sounds of the ranch, the creak of timbers, the whisper of wind, the faint howl of a coyote far away. In that fragile stillness, something began to change. The distance between them, made of fear and unfamiliarity, started to fade. He moved to light the fire, kneeling near the hearth. Sparks leapt up and the flames caught, spilling light across the cabin walls. Clara watched him, realizing for the first time that his quietness wasn't coldness. It was patience, the kind that waited for the world to make sense again. When he turned back, she had slipped off her veil. Setting it gently on the bed beside her, her eyes shone in the firelight, full of uncertainty, but also something new, resolve. "I've never had anyone look at me the way you do," she said softly. "And how's that?" he asked. "Like I'm not broken." Daniel's jaw tightened, emotion flickering through his expression. "Maybe because you're not." She blinked fast, holding his gaze. The air between them hummed with words left unsaid, promises still forming. He stood, crossed the room, and stopped in front of her again. "This life out here, it's hard. The land takes as much as it gives. But it's easier when you've got someone willing to face it with you." Clara nodded slowly. "Then I'll try. That's all I ask." They stayed like that, two strangers, bound by a vow, neither fully understood until the fire burned low. Shadows danced over their faces, and outside the rain began to fall. Clara drew in a steady breath.
"Daniel?"
"Yes?" "If I get it wrong, if I make a mess of things." He smiled, faint but certain. "Then we start again." And somehow, that simple sentence was enough to ease every fear she'd carried into the room. She lay back, eyes tracing the flicker of firelight on the ceiling. Daniel sat near her, his silhouette outlined in the dim glow. Neither spoke again, but they didn't need to. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was a beginning. Outside, the storm softened into a lullaby against the roof. Inside, the rancher and his bride sat together in the half-light, learning what it meant to belong to the land, to each other and to something that might, one day, become love.